Bienvenidos, muchachos. I bring you potentially good news regarding our beloved language, Rust. Not so beloved if you prefer something else. As most of us know, the Linux kernel have been written primarily in C for over 3 decades. However, the work that's mostly done by this gentleman here, Miguel Ojeda, Rust is starting to make inroads into the Linux kernel. For the time being, it's mostly with they're writing drivers with Rust. But rest assured, though, if you're a C lover, that the 25 million lines of C code in the Linux kernel would not be replaced with Rust anytime soon. If you wish to follow the progress of Rust for the Linux kernel, you can certainly follow the Linux unofficial mailing list here. Now, I will link all sources in the description used in this video. Miguel is updating the community at this mailing list here. Also, here is the GitHub repo, the public GitHub repo for Rust for the Linux kernel. If you'd rather not sit through 45 minutes worth of video by Miguel Ojeda, this article here at ZDNet will give you a synopsis of what's happening in the Linux kernel and the Rust world. If you're not aware, this gentleman here, Linus Torvalds, created the Linux kernel some 3 decades ago.
Yeah, fuck you.
As you can see, he's a colorful gentleman. You have to have really thick skin to work with Linus. And he is a genius, no doubt about that. He hates NVIDIA. He hates C++. He hates Java. He pretty much hates every language that's ever come along in the last 30 years except for C. Here's another example of what I'm talking about here on the public email here on the Linux kernel mailing list. Okay, he's old school. He protects his baby, the Linux kernel. So that's why a lot of us in the Rust community were pleasantly surprised when Linus mentioned this in regards to Rust being in the Linux kernel, at least making inroads into the Linux kernel. I quote from Linus, "From a technical angle, does that make sense? Who knows? That's not the point. The point is for a project to stay interesting and to stay fun, you have to play with it," meaning Rust. So in Linus speak, he might as well be saying, "I love you, Rust," right? Given his personality. And I think this is a subtle way of saying that, if you think about it, the software engineers and programmers that developed the Linux kernel in C, keep in mind that C was developed probably around somewhere 1978, and the Linux kernel was developed in 1991. Those software engineers and programmers, as great as they are retiring, right? So you need to attract fresh blood, if you will, into the community. And the Linux kernel is fantastic. It led to many wonderful operating systems, and it's used everywhere. And C is a great programming language. I kind of did it ass backwards. I programmed in C++ before I discovered C, and I actually like C more. But I'm the type of guy who if you were to ask me to go get you a Coke, I would say diet or regular. What flavor? Vanilla, cherry? You want it on the rocks? Do you want it at room temperature? So, very little abstraction. And when I leave a room, I make sure that the lights are turned off and the doors are locked and nothing's in there that's not supposed to be in there. So, with my brain, C just makes sense to me. So I can see the hesitant to go to something new. But just because something is new doesn't mean it's great. As much as I like Rust, software engineers and programmers these days expect a one place find all to learn a new technology or language like JavaScript or Java or whatever, okay, or Kotlin. And Rust provides that, even though it's a system level language. I made a video a couple years ago, almost a couple years ago, on how to um, set up Rust for development, and if, at least on a Mac. And if you don't like Rust, I'll show you how to uninstall it. And Rust also has an online rebel called the Playground for you to play around with, right? Um, and it has beautiful documentation on how to install. And if you watch my video a couple years ago, and you went through the process, you can always update. And it's been a while since you installed it. You can always run Rust update. Okay, just like npm or Dino or Java or .NET. And by the way, if you see commercials played on my video, I'm not getting one red cent of that. Not until I get more subscribers. So I appreciate if you can subscribe to my channel. I don't get anything until I get 1,000 subscribers from YouTube. Anyhow, so Rust has a very modern ecosystem, right? For a language that's as powerful as it is. For C, well, the official C. I mentioned earlier that C was released to the public in 1978. Well, it was actually, I think they started using it at Bell Labs even earlier than that. Um, but I mean, you can go to the ANSI store and buy the manual for $104, or if you're a member, you get it for a little bit cheaper. Uh, that's the same thing. There's a guide here for free, and you can also buy it from the official ISO site as well. This is I believe let's see, yeah, this is the American ISO, and this is the international ISO. You see here, 198 Swiss francs. Yeah, it's not cheap. Okay, and of course, obviously, if you're clever, okay, you can learn C in various sources outside of academia. To be clear, that was $403 US. There goes your gentleman's club budget. So this was, I think, the first C programming book written by the creator of the C programming language himself, Dennis Ritchie, and Brian Kernighan essentially wrote the first tutorial. For the time being, like, it's $55 for paperback. If you want to buy it on Amazon, of course, I have no corporate overlord. I'm not sponsored by anybody. So get it wherever the hell you want. So let's take a look at two trivial programs. The one on the left is written in Rust, and the one on the right, I wrote that in C. So both programs just take two integers and add them together and print them out to the console. Now, Rust has this sort of like duck typing, like in TypeScript, where if I do not explicitly set a variable to a 32-bit integer based on the value that I'm assigning to this variable is presumed that's going to be a 32-bit integer. This value here, this I32, that's metadata from VS Code. VS Code is adding that metadata in there. Here on line 3, I am explicitly assigning the number 2 variable to be a 32-bit integer. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. Now, the big difference is that how I started this Rust project is that I went to the terminal and I run the command cargo new, and then the name of the application, right? And it'll spin up everything for me. Excuse me, I just have to sneeze right there. So everything is spin up on the command line in Rust, and it created this whole shebang, this whole app for me. On the C side, on the C lang side, I create everything manually. Remember what I said earlier about turning off the lights when I leave the room? Well, there you go. Okay. And so on the Rust side, if I wanted to run and compile this, I would just do cargo. I've already built it, but you normally you run build. I've already run build, so you can just run cargo run, and you have your, sum. Okay. On the C side, on the C lang side, once I save my project, I would run a make command. The reason why I'm able to run the make command is because on the Mac, CLang is installed out of the box for my operating system, which right now is Big Sur. But you also have to install this Xcode as well. You can Google that, or you can YouTube it, whatever you want to do. It's everywhere, but you have to install this plugin for Xcode for it to work on the Mac terminal. So since I already run the make command, just do one more time, make it clear, it's up to date. Then I run it like a bash script. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it. It's one better than the other. It's subjective. Somebody in academia is going to say that, yeah, Rust is going to be better. Perhaps it is in some esoteric kind of way. But eventually, though, I think that the differences in Rust would be a little bit more tangible as we, figure some more stuff out. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. If you don't like this video, go ahead and subscribe anyways. I might grow on you. I am an acquired taste. See you next time. Bye-bye.